Huh? Yeah. No, it's like a new invasion every week. I mean, yeah, how big is this war gonna get, right? Okay. No, okay, I'll tell him. Yeah, I'll tell him now. I'm gonna tell everybody. Look, just hold on a second. Last week, my hook was the Japanese invasion of India. This week, my hook is another invasion. This week, Germany invades Hungary. See? March 25th, 1944. Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, see you next week. Yeah, bye. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Japanese invasion of India aiming at Imphal really got going, advancing as the British army pulled back. It was the Soviets who were advancing on the Ukrainian front against the Axis, though both Allied efforts at Monte Cassino and Axis ones at Bougainville did not succeed in pushing anyone back. The Japanese invasion of one corner of India is really a preemptive attack, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and this is much the case with Hungary. Operation Margareta, for that is what it is named, has been ordered by Hitler to prevent Hungary's possible collapse or defection from the war, and to ensure that German forces have a line of retreat and continued access to oil reserves. So at 4 a.m., March 19th, 1944, the German army invades Hungary, with 2 armored divisions coming from near Vienna, a motorized division from near Krakow, 2 divisions from Zagreb, and 3 from Belgrade. The OKW Journal simply says, "No resistance was encountered anywhere." Well, part of the Hungarian army is under orders not to resist, and part wants to join the Wehrmacht. Hungarian Regent Miklós Horthy must set up a cabinet that is acceptable to the Germans. But even just by the 22nd, they say that if you don't set up a new government pronto, we'll take Buda by force, disband your army, and set one up under our command. On the 23rd, former ambassador to Berlin, Domestoye, forms a new government. The Germans are not unanimous with their approval, but it is good enough. What is becoming really obvious, though, is that the Germans do not at all agree on what is to happen to the Hungarian army. Disarmed, subsumed, continued independence, left in Hungary, all sent to fight the Soviets, disbanded. The Soviet breakthrough near Tarnopol, which I'll get to in a minute, sort of clinches it for the time being, though. The Axis need reinforcements, and so today, the 25th, Hitler sends 2 of his occupying divisions to the Eastern Front. The Hungarian General Staff declares also today that a mobilization can be done in just 10 days, and 8 Hungarian divisions then sent to the Eastern Front for use by the Germans. But the politicking is far from finished, it seems. I imagine we'll see more of it next week. As for all the Axis forces actually fighting in the Soviet Union, the German 75th Division reports as the week gets going that the Soviets are crossing the Dniester in several places near Yampol, but they can't do any reconnaissance because the horses are all exhausted and the only motor vehicle they have that still works is a Volkswagen. On the 20th, the Soviets take Mogilev Podolsky and Vinnytsia, both big communications hubs. It's 38th Army that takes Vinnytsia, but its spearheads are then immediately aiming towards Kamenets-Podolsky and the gap between the flanks of 1st Panzer Army and 46th Panzer Corps. Now, 1st Ukrainian Front Commander Georgy Zhukov has been massing force to finally break through between Tarnopol and Proskurov, and on the 21st sends 200 tanks from the 1st and 4th Tank Armies ramming through the front along the railway line and heading south. On the 23rd, 1st Tank Army turns west and pushes back the enemy on both sides of Tarnopol. The garrison in the city remains there according to Hitler's fortress directive. Meanwhile, further east, 1st Guards Army and 3rd Guards Tank Army reach Proskurov. That same day, 4th Tank Army advances past Chertkov, south of Tarnopol, and not that far north of the Dniester River. It looks like they plan to cross the river and link up with the armor from Ivan Konyev's 2nd Ukrainian Front, which has been pushing west just south of Mogilev Podolsky. Thing is, passing Chertkov throws German 1st Panzer Army into full crisis mode, since the Red Army has now cut its lifeline, a single-track railway. Since the Panzer Army also has its back against the mighty river, it is, for all intents and purposes, surrounded. Army Group South Commander Erich von Manstein orders the army to anchor its right flank on the river, hold, and push back to the north, and attack westward to regain and reopen the railway line. Hans Valentin Hube commands 1st Panzer Army, and neither he nor Manstein think Proskurov can be held with things the way they are. Hitler won't let them withdraw, but Hube has all the non-essential heavy equipment and vehicles there destroyed. Well, today on the 25th, Soviet 1st Ukrainian Front takes Proskurov. Manstein flies to meet Hitler today at Berchtesgaden and angrily insists that 1st Panzer Army must break out. Hitler must give the order to do so at once today, and Manstein needs at least one fresh army corps to operate. Hitler says, nope, not happening. However, they meet again tonight just after midnight, and Hitler relents, authorizing a breakout and giving Manstein the 2nd SS Panzer Corps and the other 2 divisions. I wonder what in the world will happen tomorrow. A note about those reinforcement units. While those 2 divisions, and 4 he'd sent over earlier in the month, come from fronts not under enemy attack, 2nd SS Panzer Corps is part of Hitler's anti-invasion forces. See, Hitler is very focused on an impending Allied invasion of Western Europe. So losing that corps to the Eastern Front is a tough pill to swallow, since, as experience shows, forces sent over there take a long time to come back. Anyhow, a lot of Ivan Konyev's 2nd Ukrainian Front has crossed the Bug River by this week. Manstein thinks that what they'll do next is turn south between the Bug and Dniester rivers, and then, together with 3rd Ukrainian Front, try to surround German 8th and 6th armies. 8th Army flies units from west of Kirovograd to Balta to start building a front to block this. Still, Earl Ziemke points out in Stalingrad to Berlin that the Axis forces in the south, 8th Army and Army Group A, have a new kind of trouble. Their rear echelons are becoming ever more compressed into the space east of Bessarabia. Hitler does not want German troops to enter Romanian territory because of promises made to Romanian leader Ion Antonescu. Army Group A commander Ewald von Kleist declares he might do so anyhow, in spite of both Hitler and Antonescu. We will see about that in the coming weeks, but, important here, already his forces are starting to depend on the Romanian railway system, which is descending into chaos as it becomes more and more overloaded. In Transnistria, the Romanian occupation zone east of the Dniester, the Romanian railroad men shunted German troop trains onto sidings to make way for their own evacuation trains. When 8th Army moved its headquarters from Pervomaisk to Kotovsk by rail, a distance of 65 miles, the trip took 27 hours. As we've seen though, Konyev sent a lot of his force towards Yampol and Mogilev Podolsky, which took some pressure off 8th Army. It looks like Konyev is enjoying operational freedom to the west more than he wants to attack the 2 German armies on his left. But still, he's got armored recon forces all the way to Balti, and his forces are building no fewer than 8 bridges over the Dniester. Should they advance to the Prut River and the Carpathians, then 8th Army and Army Group A will be squeezed between the mountains and the Black Sea. Karl Adolf Hollett's German 6th Army, which has been pulling back to the Bug River, chased by Rodion Malinovsky's 3rd Ukrainian Front, manages to establish a solid front along the river by the 21st. Hollett's health has been wrecked by this time, so Hitler announces that day that a new commander would take over in a few days, though it might be a week or 2. Hollett doesn't get to rest at the Bug though, for by week's end, Kleist decides that 6th and 8th armies have to pull back from the Bug. Tomorrow morning, spoiler, Kleist will call Army Chief of Staff Kurt Zeitzler and tell him that he's taken over 8th Army, has the orders ready for withdrawal to the Dniester, and plans to issue them in the afternoon. Zeitzler tells him to see Hitler first. On the 27th, Hitler agrees to the withdrawal as long as they hold the line from Tiraspol to Odessa. Although I've talked about the Hungarian situation lately, I also talked the last 2 weeks about Soviet and Finnish negotiations for an armistice, and that terms were not reached, but I did not talk about how the Germans feel about that. See, in early February, it seemed like the Soviets might break Army Group North and possibly drive on Helsinki. That sure seemed like it could happen. And that is when former Finnish Prime Minister and Finnish representative to the Soviets just before the Winter War, Juho Paasikivi, went to Stockholm to meet with Soviet representatives and discussions began. We have a special this month that either recently came out or is just about to come out about the whole Finnish situation, so I will not go into more detail here. But a neutral Finnish or Soviet control of Hanko and Suursaari Island would not keep the Red Navy bottled up in the east of the Gulf of Finland. And that would mean German submarine training and testing would be stopped. And that would mean the end of the U-boat war for good. See, everything is connected. Hitler and company made plans to take over Åland and Suursaari if the Finns seemed like they were going to defect. But in general, during the early stages of negotiations, the German government adopted an attitude of restraint on the assumption that Finland was not yet ready for peace at any price, and consequently, a look at the Soviet demands might be the best remedy for the peace fever. As the Army Group North situation improved and Finnish dismay at the terms grew, Hitler began to apply pressure. This month, he's slowed down the flow of weapons to Finland and has a few more such tricks up his sleeves. As for the German 20th Mountain Army stationed in Finland, its commander Eduard Dietl noticed that in February, the Soviet Karelian front opposite him began beefing up their numbers after 2 years of the front just remaining static. In fact, by the beginning of March, they had some 165,000 men there, up from 100,000, and it looked like there would be a big March offensive, likely hitting 37th Mountain Corps across the waste of Finland to the Gulf of Bothnia. There, the Russians brought up 2 new divisions and 4 brigades, plus rocket launchers and artillery, and extended their right flank northwestward until they had a springboard behind the German line of fortifications. On the 22nd of March, 20th Mountain Army concluded that the buildup was completed and the offensive might begin at any time. However, even now, a few days later, that danger seems to have subsided. Dietl has the rather suspicious conclusion that if the Finns had accepted an armistice, the Soviets would have attacked this week. I do not know if he is correct or not. Allied attacks that do continue this week and then come to their ends are happening in Italy. Last week's renewed assault on Monte Cassino, both the town and the mount, is a bloody stalemate, and the death toll just rises. On the 20th then, both Allied armies in Italy Commander Harold Alexander and New Zealand Commander Bernard Freyberg agree that Cassino losses are too heavy, and if there are no real gains, within 2 days, they must suspend action. On the 22nd, with New Zealand casualties reaching ever more worrying levels, Freyberg asks to pull back. When Theater Commander Henry Wilson says they should soldier on, his reply, according to Rick Atkinson, is Passchendaele. This ending operation, Operation Dickens, is the 3rd breakthrough attempt in 2 months and the 3rd failure. Why is this? One Gurkha officer writes, "The strongest defenses in Europe were attacked by a single corps consisting of 2 divisions on a narrow front in the heart of winter without any attempt at diversionary operations. There has not been a real coherent master plan. And also, a lot of command has supreme faith in tanks, but in this theater, there are often liabilities, and it seems you cannot simply bomb your way to victory here." Well, the Italian fronts go quiet for the time being. The fighting in northeast India is anything but quiet, though. On the 21st, 20th Indian Division has completed its withdrawal in good order. They are set up on the Shannan Hills and between Pelel and Wangjing. The Shannan Saddle, which I spoke about last week, is to be their forward defensive position. 17th Division is still fighting its way back north through the Japanese roadblocks, but is inflicting heavy casualties on Japanese 33rd Division as it advances. The 48th Indian Brigade from 17th Division is tasked with taking the supply depot the Japanese 215th Regiment holds on the Tiddim Road. On the 23rd, after several attacks, they managed to take the ridge overlooking the depot, and the Japanese withdraw. Okay, over the past couple weeks, I've talked about the Japanese attacks towards Imphal from the southwest and southeast, but there is a third prong of Renya Mutaguchi's attack. The Japanese advance from the south did not come as a surprise. These were the main routes from Burma, and they had expected the 15th Army to use them. It was the strength of the attack from the north of Imphal that was the surprise in March 1944. At most, one Japanese regiment was expected to come from this direction and cut the Imphal-Kohima road. Instead, Mikołaj sent forth the entire 31st Division, commanded by Lieutenant General Sato, to Kohima. And moving just south of it was Lieutenant General Yamauchi's 15th Division. Its objective was Imphal. Katach goes on to describe the terrain here. Imphal is at the northern end of the Imphal Valley. Northwest of that is 4th Corps headquarters, which has the only other all-weather airfield besides the one at Palel, which I mentioned last week. The road up to Kohima runs parallel to the airfield. The Imphal River runs east of the road up to Kangpokpi. This is all hilly area, but it's really an arc of mountains that surrounds Imphal from the north. Since there are few passes through the jungle and mountains here, not like the Tamu-Palau Road and the Shannan Saddle, the Allies don't think the Japanese would or even could come from this direction in force. So, as per Mikołaj's plan, the forces up here didn't cross the Chindwin until the 15th, and as planned, British 4th Corps Commander Geoffrey Scoombs rushed his reserves to the south to deal with the twin threats from there. So it is only the 50th Indian Parachute Brigade that holds the area through which a whole Japanese division is about to head. They are defending at Ukrul, and forward units of Japanese 31st Division engage them as they fall back to Sangshak. There is fighting there the 22nd to the 26th, tomorrow, when the defenders will slip away. But the Japanese have at least been delayed a few days here. Who knows what that will mean for Mikołaj's strict timetable? Remember, Mikołaj wanted to do this operation because he was alarmed by Ord Wingate's first Chindit expedition last year, a deep penetration into occupied Burma. The second Chindit expedition is currently underway, as we've seen, but it is no longer under Wingate, for on March 24th, he dies in a plane crash. Senior Chindit Brigade Commander Joe Lentane replaces him. There is a Japanese campaign ending this week as well. On the 23rd comes a failed Japanese attack on Bougainville with heavy losses. Harukichi Hyakutake attacks with all he's got, and is not close to enough. The offensive power of 17th Army has now been completely broken. The Japanese are worn out. They've taken like 8,000 casualties over 2 weeks for some 300 Americans. This is really also the ending of the 18-month-long Solomon Islands campaign. For by now, with the aerial campaign against Rabaul and the landing and securing of Emerau Island off of New Ireland, although the remaining Japanese garrisons at Rabaul and in the Solomons are not beaten, they have been completely contained. It is some 4,000 men that are landed on Emerau the 20th, the ending of Operation Cartwheel. Spoiler, within a month that number will be over 18,000 with 2 airstrips and loads of infrastructure will be under construction thanks to the Seabees. And that is the end of the week. With Hungary occupied, Finland considering, the Japanese outmaneuvered in the South Seas, but on the march in India, the Soviets really on the march in the USSR, and Italy going quiet. Hitler is, and with some reason, worried about losing his war partners. Losing Italy last year was a pretty big deal, and now he's got a couple dozen divisions stuck there fighting. He's bringing over troops to the Soviet Union from France that he would prefer left there in case of Allied invasion. Finland is going to do what? He's certainly not going to get any help from the Japanese. He's not worried about Romania for the time being, but still, I am reminded of Erich Ludendorff, German quartermaster general during the Great War and virtual military dictator in 1917 and 18. There were 4 central powers, but as Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire were knocked out of the war and the Austro-Hungarian Empire began to just disintegrate, he opined thus about the German Empire and its prospects. We cannot fight the whole world. There is now another German Empire, that of Hitler, and if things go badly for him, he might soon find out whether or not his can. And you will find out right here on this channel, thanks to the Time Ghost Army. That is the backbone of this series, and you too can join the army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. These are the newest officers, and Felix is Army Member of the Week. And hey, if you want to see a special about the colonial riches of Southeast Asia, which is what Japan wants from this war, you can click right here for that. And click subscribe too. See you next time.